I design enormous gardens all over the world, but whatever the size of garden I'm working on, I always stick to the same principles. I'm going to show you how to use these principles when you're designing your own garden. Start by drawing a rough outline of the shape of your garden. Sometimes it can be hard to get this right because very few gardens are actually exact squares. A good tip is to have a look on Google Maps, which will show you the more precise outline of your garden shape. If you're prepared to throw a little bit more money at it, you can actually buy a scale drawing of your plot from Ordnance Survey, and I find that actually very useful when I'm starting to design the garden. Once you've got your outline down on paper, you can start to think about the sort of spaces you want in your garden, whether you want big spaces or small spaces. So it's worth considering, do you want big open areas or do you want more intimate parts of the garden? So with that in mind, you need to start filling your garden with shapes. I'd start by working from the house, and I would work from the doorway. So if my doorway's here, I'm going to start putting down some interlocking shapes on paper to form the surfaces in my garden. Now, I think it's worth considering that you only want to put down circles, rectangles and squares, so whole shapes. You don't want anything too bitty. And you want to fill these up into the garden, a bit like you're creating a modern art picture. So they should be interlocking shapes, creating a nice display that will fill the whole shape of your garden. Something like that's ideal. At this point, we're not even thinking about what the different shapes represent. All we're trying to do is experiment with different shapes until we come up with an arrangement that we're happy with, an arrangement that looks nice on paper. Now, I'm dealing with an average size suburban garden at the minute. I've chosen to draw one that's about 7 metres by 7 metres. It's not entirely square, but few gardens are. And within that, I've created a series of quite intimate areas using overlapping squares and rectangles. Now you can scale this principle up or down depending on the size of your garden. It's exactly the same principle, whatever size you've got. Once you're happy with your arrangement of shapes on your paper, we can start to consider what different surfaces they might represent. If I was making this a low maintenance garden and I really wanted to think about big open spaces for entertaining, then I'm mainly dealing with areas of paving, areas of brick, areas of gravel. So each different square might represent a slightly different material, or I might repeat that. I might start off with an area of paving and then perhaps edge the next square with brick and fill it with gravel. But overall, I'd have a nice big open space that was really concentrating on varied textures. If I was interested in creating a garden which was a little more intimate, I might do something completely different, and I might use the interlocking shapes I've got that meander out into the garden as my hard surfacing, my paths, going from a large terrace, perhaps moving through transition points to a path to a back area for seating that's a bit larger again. And then I surround all that with the planting, so it kind of really hugs my areas of hard landscaping. So I've got my planting. It'll make the area just a little bit more mysterious because I won't be able to see the whole garden at the same time, and it will create a really different feel to the space than if I was making the whole area open using hard materials. So to recap, designing a garden is actually a very simple process. You start with the basic outline of your garden, remembering to put your house in, of course. Then you start to fill those shapes with squares, circles, rectangles that overlap to form a pleasing pattern within that. Once you've got a pattern you like, you can start to think about what materials you're using. And then once you've got that nailed, you can start thinking about the planting. You mustn't forget the height, of course. Thinking about the garden in 3 dimensions is really important. But overall, it's an incredibly simple process. These are the principles all garden designers use when they're planning a garden. It doesn't matter whether it's a courtyard or acres and acres of a stately home, the principles remain the same. So give it a go. It's really not rocket science. Happy gardening.